Warning, this is not a video essay. Zero research has been done on this topic, and this video is nothing more or less than just some asshole talking about stuff. So if that sounds good to you, keep watching. Okay, disclaimer given, this is going to be a bit different than the kind of videos we've been making lately, so bear with me here. I actually had a number of topics to choose from for this next video, and what we're going to talk about today was not any of them. But when I made the mistake of browsing the hellscape known as Twitter a few days ago, I noticed a bit of the good old-fashioned discourse sneaking into my timeline between the usual anime titties. The discourse in this case was regarding the recently released films The Fall Guy and Furiousa, both of which failed to meet box office expectations, to say the least. For many, this seems to be the final nail in the coffin of cinema, with posts like this one from everyone's favorite Moist Man summing up one of the key arguments I've been seeing thrown around while simultaneously reminding me why I stopped watching his movie reviews.
Everyone complains about regurgitated, formulaic, dogshit, boring movies being most of what comes out, but then refuse to go see actual good ones like this. Tragic.
And after being barraged by a number of similar tweets on the timeline, I sussed out the two main threads in just about all of them. Number one, nobody goes to see movies anymore that aren't part of a particular franchise, are /formulaic/ things you personally don't like. And number two, nobody goes to the movies anymore because everything is going to digital in almost no time. Now, my intent with this video is not to provide a refutation on these points, but rather to offer my own perspective on the matter as a guy who is just as guilty of barely ever going to the theater anymore. Before doing so, however, allow me to state my case. I have loved the medium of film as a storytelling device for my entire life. I don't know that I would necessarily call myself a cinephile, because I'm sure that my taste in films would preclude me from the label in the eyes of, quote, true cinephiles. This isn't to say that I don't enjoy grounded prestige dramas, I do, but I also just happen to enjoy superhero flicks and cornball Rebel Wilson comedies. Frankly, it takes a lot to make me dislike a movie, and as long as what's going on is entertaining, I'm willing to watch a lot. And that's why, in the pre-COVID times, my wife and I actually paid for an active AMC A-list membership, which let us watch 3 movies a week for free. Now, rarely did we ever use all 3, but we went to the theater just about every week anyway, so it ended up being a good deal for us and led to us watching even more films than we probably would have otherwise. And one of the biggest reasons that we decided to commit to a plan like this that would require regular visits to get our money's worth is that I've always enjoyed the experience of going to the theater. Everyone likes to dunk on that Nicole Kidman ad where she talks about the magic of the cinema, but for me at least, she really does manage to hit the nail on the head about the theater experience. There's nothing in the world like going to the theater. Seeing these stories play out on a huge screen, surrounded by an immersive sound system, and being in a darkened room with like-minded people who are there to watch these stories play out was something that no home entertainment system could ever hope to match. I'll say it is a magical experience. I remember listening to an episode of a podcast once where the host described their first time watching The Avengers at home after its physical release, and describing the feeling as this is dead, when comparing it to having been seen in the theaters. I love the Marvel movies, but a Marvel movie you're watching at home is an entirely different beast in comparison to the feeling of being in a crowded theater full of Marvel fans on opening night. There's an electricity in the air. Everyone is there to have fun, and it's one of the only times in the theater you can hear people cheering and making noise during parts of the movie, and you don't care because you're having just as much fun. To this day, there are times when I still find myself going on YouTube and looking up those hand cam recordings from the opening night of Endgame, watching people's reactions to moments like Cap picking up Thor's hammer, the portals opening up while all the dusted characters walk through to make their final stand, or Tony completing his character arc and giving his life in the process. Hearing the cheers, the gasps, and the despair of the audience still hits me right where I live, and it's something that you could have only experienced at the theater. It's why, regardless of what my current feelings are, I still consider the theater experience to be nothing short of magical under the right conditions. And it's an experience I've tried in various ways to chase over the years. The strangest of which is probably using an app for the Oculus Quest called Big Screen VR that purported to have the experience of watching movies in a theater from your own home with other people, but surprise of surprises, it's not really the same at all. Popping into a film lobby with other people felt less like slipping into a theater and more like walking into a VR chat lobby with a movie playing in the background. You don't feel like part of a film-loving crowd so much as you feel like an exposed nerve. It's because of the unique experience that only an actual theater can provide that I never really minded the fact that you were kind of getting squeezed for all the money that you're worth. Sure, I'll pay $20 for popcorn and a cup of soda that's way larger than it needs to be and practically ensures anyone who drinks it before the halfway point of the movie isn't going to witness the whole thing without turning into Grandpa Simpson in that episode everybody but me seems to hate. Pro tip, I barely touch my drink until the third act and almost never end up having to get up to pee, so use that in your future endeavors. And of course all that is only if you found yourself in a standard theater. Whenever we were feeling particularly fancy, we would go to our local studio movie grill and pay out the wazoo for mediocre food and overpriced mixed drinks. Was it a terrible value proposition? You'd better fucking believe it, but we were paying to have an experience, and I was more than happy to do so because I wanted to have my chickie tendies while I watched the Power Rangers movie. So with all that said, it may actually come as a bit of a surprise if I told you that I almost never go to the theater anymore. I can probably count on both hands the amount of movies I've seen in any given year for the past few years, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Frankly, at this point, the only movies I can really manage to drag myself to are event films, be them the release of new Marvel movies or actual limited time events like last year's Shin Kamen Rider, which, on a quick tangent, was one of the best movie-going experiences of my life. It can sometimes feel isolating to be a Kamen Rider fan in America, and being in a room full of people who were all there to see the Karate Bugman was so validating. And to briefly readdress the topic that led to the creation of this rant in the first place, my distaste for visiting the theater these days has nothing to do with the films on offer. So many times over the past few years, I've found myself watching a trailer saying some variant of, "Oh, that looks cool, I want to go see that," while knowing full well the entire time that if I ever did, it would be on some lazy Thursday long after the movie had released digitally. Even now, I have a to-watch list that if printed out could probably wrap an entire mansion with a testament to my laziness. Hell, I only recently got around to watching the first Dune like a month ago, and I knew the entire time it was something I was going to enjoy. So, why is it then that if I love the theater so much, and I love movies so much, I've almost entirely given up on the theater experience? Well, it's your fault. Maybe not necessarily you, the person watching this, because the people watching my content are obviously all smart, cool, and sexy people who understand how to not be a chode, but there's even odds that at least a single person watching this falls under the category of people who ruined going to the movies for me. And it's at long last that we finally arrive at the closest thing to a thesis statement I have for this cry for help disguised as a YouTube video. COVID ruined the movie-going experience. Yes, I'm hardly the first person to make this observation, but when I say that I haven't been to the theater in years now, the dividing line between those years was that period of time when a significant portion of America seemed to really get in touch with their selfish side. We saw the first signs of this during the pandemic itself, when unsettlingly large swaths of people decided that their desire to carry on as if there wasn't a deadly virus going around was more important than keeping their fellow man safe. When we finally did manage to get even a slight grasp on the situation and develop vaccines, and life began to return to whatever the new normal was going to be, it was obvious that something had changed. The pandemic had emboldened those who were selfish to begin with, and this tendency began to reveal itself more and more in daily life, and most relevant to our discussion today, in the theater. I can't speak for everyone, so I won't claim that this is a universal experience, but I can tell you that in my own experience, going to the movies has been an entirely different animal pre- and post-COVID. 2 years of people primarily watching movies in their living room seems to have affected the way people perceive proper movie-going etiquette. There's no qualms about talking loudly during the movie, phone usage, or any of the other annoyances big and small that literally every theatrical presentation asks you not to do. And I mean, I was annoyed by this kind of shit even before this happened. Like, this isn't some rose-tinted pining for some perfect time in the past that never actually existed. People definitely ruined the experience in the pre-COVID era, but in my experience, those few times were few and far between. However, when I compare the amount of times that people in my theaters have been loud and disruptive at inappropriate points during movies in the post-COVID era, they far outweigh the neutral to positive experiences. Again, this is all anecdotal, but all I'm trying to do here is explain my own reasons for mostly abandoning the cinema, so with that in mind, let me tell you about the moment that more or less killed the theatrical experience for me. It was a Tuesday, and Kyra and I went to the theater to go see Godzilla Minus One. We're both huge tokusatsu fans, and the highly regarded new Godzilla film from Japan was actually getting a release in our local theater. That was pretty exciting. We got in, grabbed our snacks, and sat down as one of only 3 groups of people in the theater at that showing. And for the first 10 minutes or so, things were great. Interesting story setup, great cinematography, I was locked in. And then they showed up. This Morlock-ass couple who decided to sit down directly behind us and felt that it was their duty to put on their own personal version of Mystery Science Theater 3000 during the film. For those of you who are unfamiliar with -1, I want to make this clear: this movie is not some crazy fun roller coaster ride like the last two legendary films from Godzilla. This was a somber return to form of the horrific trauma of World War II, where Godzilla is back to acting as a metaphor just as much as he is a literal monster. This is not the kind of film where riffing is appropriate. And look, let me be clear here, I can deal somewhat with people talking during a movie depending on the situation. If this was an instance of somebody making quieter comments during the loud Godzilla attack scenes, I'd be more willing to let things slide. But when it's during a quiet scene wherein the protagonist is having a very serious conversation with his partner about his survivor's guilt as well as their struggles with raising their adopted daughter, I don't want to hear some jackass making Jerry Springer-styled comments throughout the entire thing. So I did what I never want to have to do. I tried shushing them at various points, which would work for a few minutes before they would start up again, and finally, with no other options than to let them continue ruining one of the best movies released last year, I reconciled with the fact that I was about to embrace my inner Karen and walked into the lobby where I found a theater manager having a discussion with his employees. I relayed the situation, hoping that he would just give them a warning and we could all go back to enjoying the movie in peace. The manager expressed his sympathies and walked back to the theater with me, the manager giving me a minute or so before following me in, that way I could have plausible deniability. When he did, he went to the couple and had a short conversation that was quiet enough that I couldn't really make out what they were saying, but frankly I didn't care as long as the dude got the hint. But I guess what the manager actually told them was some variant of "go kick rocks," because about a minute or so after he left, the couple got up and left the theater themselves. However, when they got to the doorframe, the man in the relationship made sure to stop, turn around, and shout a torrent of horrible things in my direction. I have no interest in repeating exactly what he said, but what is important is that this dude was genuinely unhinged. Have I ever mentioned that I live in Texas? A state where gun ownership is usually a pretty fair assumption, especially from people who are crazy enough to scream entire diatribes of hatred because they got kicked out of a movie for talking too much? I'm gonna be honest. I wasn't really able to fully enjoy the rest of the movie because I spent that time wondering if this guy was going to either run back to the theater to attack me or if I was going to get jumped in the parking lot. And look, I wouldn't blame you for thinking that this is an overreaction. I'm just here recounting a story and I can't really relate perfectly what it felt like in that moment, but I promise you that I make no exaggeration when I say that I was genuinely worried that my wife and I were in legitimate danger and that whatever happened would be my own fault. This was the last time I have ever been to a theater of my own volition since. Between then and now, there have been no small number of movies that I've wanted to see, but every time I do, I think back to that moment and all the small annoyances that led up to it. I think about the fact that the best I can hope for is to pay the same amount of money I was paying pre-COVID to go see a movie when my paycheck is now not where it used to be in regards to the cost of living, and the realistic case is that a series of small annoyances will interrupt the movie I've paid so much to watch, and the worst case is getting into a genuine altercation because I tried to say something. So, no, it has nothing to do with movies like Madam Web or a lack of desire to see original, interesting films that aren't attached to franchises. I still have just as much interest now as I used to in just about everything that the medium of film has to offer. But the value proposition just isn't there like it used to be because nobody knows how to behave in public anymore. And it's not just me, again, this is all anecdotal, but I've heard plenty of other anecdotes from people all over the internet who've had experiences similar to mine, minus maybe the Godzilla incident. So, for now, I mostly just watch movies at home now when they're available for digital streaming. If that means the box office numbers of underdog films suffer, then I'm sorry, but that's not my fault or yours, and blaming audiences for what is more or less a hellscape of modern cinema is childishly short-sighted at best. I don't know what a solution to this problem looks like, or if one could even exist, because I don't know at this point what could bring me back to being a regular theater patron. So, that's about it, really. That's all I have to say. If you enjoyed watching this, then that's kind of weird because I can't imagine this being enjoyable, but toss me a like and subscribe, and go check out one of my other videos if you did. I just recently made a video about Sucker for Love, A Date to Die For, which is probably going to be one of my favorite games of 2024. And hey, we recently unlocked channel membership, so if you like what we're doing here, toss me a couple of bucks. You'll get access to just some extended afterthoughts on all my different videos, and I'll start leaving shoutouts in the end of videos for anybody who does want to join membership. So, with all that said, just remember that this has been a powerfully pointless movie. This has been a powerfully pointless video, but I hope you enjoyed it anyways. And cut.